Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Your Mortgage Process. I'm, of course, your host, Greg Wareham. We got a great guest for you today, Mr. Kevin Saum. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Greg, thanks for having me. That intro music, I feel like I'm walking out of a tunnel,
right?
For an NFL game or something. I'm ready to go.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And you're an athlete, so you know.
Oh, yeah.
So Kevin is with eXp Realty in Morristown, correct?
Correct, and specifically with the Socorro Group.
Okay.
It's a team, yep.
Got it. And I know you've been in real estate for a couple of years, but we're going to get into that and in all of that. You know, one of the things when we're talking to Kevin about bringing you on the show, you have a very interesting story, riddled with challenge and riddled with rebuilding and different things you needed to do to get to where you're at today. So, Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I recently got into the real estate world 2 years ago, right at the perfect time when the market's just ripe for new agents to really, find some success. So,
welcome to the party, Kevin.
Yeah. But yeah, I think my whole story kind of started when I was 17 in that I had a traumatic brain injury playing high school football. Specifically, it was called second impact syndrome, and I can get into the specifics of it, but
yeah, second impact syndrome. So let's talk about it, Kevin, because I know that you were a extremely good high school football player. You're looking to go to college to play football, and in my understanding of what's going on, you were hurt on the field. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So essentially, this was 2007, before people started talking about concussions like they do today.
Right.
So I basically had a really bad headache after a game. And I was a senior captain, fullback, linebacker, so I was sticking my face in every single play, playing both ways, like how most high school teams operate. And I had a really bad headache after a game that never really went away. I know you play football, so I'm sure you've experienced some headaches in your day, so that wasn't really abnormal.
They didn't talk about it.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, all right, I'll sleep it off and it'll get better. But the headache never really got better.
Right.
And when I was running around at practice or even at gym class, it felt like my brain was bouncing inside my head. So I knew that something was more seriously wrong than what I would typically experience with a headache. But again,
so you did the prudent thing and decided not to play.
Not quite. Yeah. It was let me go to my coach as a 17-year-old,
right,
young man who looked up to this guy and wanted him to think that I was tough, quote unquote.
Right.
And be like, yeah, your senior captain's going to sit out for this game because he's got a headache. I just didn't see that flying very well. So I ultimately decided to take 4 Advil instead and not tell anyone that my head was hurting me.
It's a solid plan.
Yeah.
Good. That sounds like a 17-year-old plan.
It's pretty accurate. Yeah. Not very well thought out or future thinking.
Sure.
But yeah, I played in the 4th game of our season and we were 0-4 at the time. We didn't win. We weren't making the playoffs. And it's a stat that I don't love saying, but we were the only team. I was the only graduating class under my coach, who currently still coaches today, who's never made the playoffs. In his almost 30 years of coaching football, he's only not made the playoffs 3 years, and it was the only 3 years that I played varsity football. So I didn't want to be that guy.
All the more reason for you to play.
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
right?
I get it. Yeah, you don't let him down.
Yeah, so ended up playing, got hit in the head a couple more times. It was kind of close to the end zone, reaching out, trying to dive for a touchdown, and a defender came in, on my right side, went helmet to helmet. Had some blurred vision, but you play football,
sure.
So you're a yard away from the goal line, you're thinking, oh,
adrenaline kicks in.
Yeah, it's no, I'm going to score a touchdown.
I can almost see straight. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and you were playing fullback in that situation, right?
We ran the wing T, so
got it.
I'm pretty much a running back.
Got it.
So scored a touchdown on the next play, but on the next offensive series, I am running the ball again. Again, my blurred vision starting to ensue. It's super foggy that day. You couldn't even see 10 feet in front of you. Sure. So I'm is it sweat in my eyes? Is it the fog? What's going on with my vision? But ultimately the play that ended my football career, I was kind of just a normal run, just received the handoff from the quarterback. And then obviously we were 0-4, so it wasn't too long after I touched the ball that there was defenders wrapped around my legs.
Right.
So I'm going down, and then a linebacker comes in, and all I remember seeing is just white shoulder pad coming right at my face. So he pretty much made impact with my head, and then my head hit the ground. And after that, I thought that it should have been a flag for a late hit because I was already almost down. He was just finishing me off.
Let's talk about the penalty. Let's not talk about your injury.
Right. Yeah. So I get up and be why the ref didn't throw a flag? But when I stood up, I couldn't feel my legs.
Did you just collapse right away?
It was like rubber. I had some ability to walk and like stand up, I could tell something like neurologically, and like the word neurologically wasn't obviously going through my head at the time. It was more like, I have a concussion, I can't feel my legs. Like my brain hurts and I can't feel my legs. My brain hurts and I can't feel my legs. I was just like repeating that over and over again in the huddle.
Yeah.
So eventually my buddy took me, helped me to the sideline because I was having trouble walking, and I have like chronic leg cramps. So everyone always thought I was just like cramping.
Right.
But when I sat down on the bench, my athletic trainer checked me out, and I kept repeating myself like, my brain hurts, I can't feel my legs, over and over again.
Now you remember that portion of it.
This is all like retold to me.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So
you get hit, you're on the ground, you're injured, but you jump right up, right? The adrenaline jumps you right up. You get back into the huddle, and you're like, all right, I don't feel so good.
And honestly, if my friend didn't help me to the sideline, like I probably would have tried to line up again.
Okay, you killed yourself.
I almost did.
Right.
So I was sitting on the bench. My athletic trainer, there's doctors on the sideline too, and they wanted to take a look at me to see what was going on. My dad was on the sideline with me, no idea who he was. And, but when my athletic trainer took a different perspective, she noticed that I was like gazing with my eyeballs, like towards the right side. So I was just like staring right. And she had a background as like in EMS. So she's seen a lot of car wrecks and like people with brain bleeds. So that's an indication that I had a brain bleed.
Okay.
So as soon as she saw that, she called for a helicopter, and the doctors were like, why are you calling for a helicopter? Like, he's talking to us, he's cognizant. And literally, like, as soon as she called for it, I collapsed on the bench, and my cleats were stuck in the ground. So when I seized, I had a grand mal seizure. I kind of like stiffened up, and I knocked the entire bench over that I was sitting on.
Oh my goodness.
And at that point, they were just trying to get me to the helicopter landing spot, which was like a baseball field a couple miles down the road. But at that point, I wasn't breathing. I was seizing, and my athletic trainer didn't think that I was going to survive based off of how I was presenting. Mm-hmm. So just before we got to the helicopter, this is when I start to remember some things, and it's because I like woke up.
Now you're on the field, and you're having a seizure.
Yep.
And you have a brain bleed. You stop breathing. Who saved your life?
My athletic trainer, 100%, because I told you it was foggy that night. There was like a 5-minute window that helicopter was going to be able to land, and it was like right at that time.
Wow.
So had it not been the case, I don't know if I would have gotten the care as quickly as I would have needed.
Sure.
To do that. But yeah, I woke up in the ambulance to the bag valve mask breathing for me, and I pushed it away because it was like uncomfortable.
Sure.
But before that, I wasn't breathing. So get in the helicopter, get to the hospital, and at that point, I'm cognitively there. Like, I can have a conversation with you. I remember everything up to the point of when I collapsed on the field. And what the doctors don't really even believe that I had a grand mal seizure because I'm so cognitively with it.
Right.
But when they go in and do the CAT scan, they see that I have a midline shift in my brain, which shows significant swelling in my brain. Mm-hmm. And then there's a subdural and a subarachnoid hematoma, which are fancy words for a brain bleed.
Right.
So I had 2 brain bleeds and this brain swelling. And at that point, they pretty much told my parents that I had a 50% chance of surviving through the night, not even to mention how I would cognitively, end up after this whole ordeal.
Right.
So
your parents must have just been beside themselves.
Oh, yeah. And I've got like the ultimate helicopter mom of like, and she was actually on a business trip in Florida at the time. And she was in the air while all this was happening. So she lands to like all these missed calls, text messages and stuff. So she got dropped right up at the hospital.
So you're in there and they bring you right in for surgery, obviously.
Not actually, they were hoping that the bleeds, because I was cognitively okay, they were hoping to not have to drill into my skull.
Right.
So they're hoping that the bleeds would kind of like subside on their own. But it was actually only getting worse as the days progressed. So I think the game was on a Friday. I'm pretty sure I had the surgery on Sunday.
Okay.
But basically, they had to perform a craniotomy. And as I'm getting wheeled into surgery, the doctors literally told me that I would never set foot on a football field again, which at that point in time, as a 17-year-old high school senior, that's all I cared about. Mm-hmm. I wanted to play college football. That was how I proved my worth to the world, was through this football field.
Right.
So obviously that was devastating.
I can imagine. So then you have the procedure. They have to cut a piece of your skull out.
Yeah.
And we were talking about before the show, you still have there's an open spot on your head, a soft spot on your head from it.
Yeah, so I have a hole like the size of a quarter in my head, and they originally did cover that hole with the bone flap that they took out. But about a month after the surgery, I woke up and my head was like swollen out to the side, and I realized that I probably had an infection. So I went back to the hospital, and they ended up removing the bone flap, which was the cause of the infection. And they pretty much told me like the risk of having a hole in my head didn't outweigh the risk of going in for another surgery to put a prosthetic bone flap over my the hole in my head.
No, makes sense. And, and you're blessed because it didn't wreck your hairline at all.
To be honest, my first scar from the first surgery was way worse than the second
I mean,
one.
it looks perfect.
Thanks. I mean, the guy, the second surgeon, like actually fixed like my scar, so you could barely see it now. But yeah, I'm a big haircut guy too, so like I like the fades of the barber.
It's high and tight.
I know. So
right. Looks good.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well, you know what, and that's and we were chatting a little bit about this before the show. So it's about a 6-month recovery physically from what happened to you, but the bigger issue is the mental aspect of it, right, Kevin?
Yeah. I mean, I was able to play baseball my senior year.
Okay.
So I got back to sports, at least a non-contact sport. But yeah, honestly, like the mental turmoil of losing that identity of being a football player and an athlete is what kind of tormented me for honestly like the next 10 years after that.
I can imagine.
It was tough to deal with.
So you end up going to Rutgers.
Yep.
Right. And you graduated from Rutgers with what type of a degree?
I got my degree in sport management, which is what every realtor's degree is usually.
It's a perfect fit.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I talked to all my sport management buddies, and like literally no one's working in sports. So it's classic sport management degree. But yeah, I did sport management, so technically exercise science and sports studies.
All right, you got that from Rutgers. And then I know he's not going to say it, but then you got a master's degree from Georgetown.
Yeah, so I was super passionate about sports health and safety and kind of like player advocacy when it came to sports injuries and stuff like that. And I had these big dreams of changing the culture of football and, all things that I felt like led up to the severity of my injury.
Sure.
And Georgetown had a relationship with the NFL Players Association, which is the union for the players. And they obviously were dealing with a lot of concussion stuff and player safety related things.
Oh, it's right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, and a lot of the professors in the Georgetown program worked at the NFLPA. So in my head, I'm like, oh, this is money, dude. Like, I'm going to do this master's program, get my internship at the NFLPA.
You're going to change the world.
And then change the world right off into the promised land. And I checked most of those boxes, did the internship, made the connections. But when it came down to actually landing the job, actually my injury, the history of my injury and me being as vocal about it as I was is what ultimately led me to not working at the NFLPA.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that was disappointing. And I ended up moving back home to New Jersey to fall into a job with a physical therapist who helped me after my injury.
I got to back up for 1 second. And this is no slight on, we're huge football fans. We chatted about that before, but the vocality of your injury, right? And the fact that you were hurt playing football and this is what happened to you probably wasn't a great look for the NFL would be my guess.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, the NFL definitely wouldn't want to be like promoting this kind of story because you want to have as many kids playing football as possible. And to be honest, like I'm far enough removed from the NFLPA that I'm not really worried about what I say on camera about it. But at the end of the day, the NFLPA wants what's in the best interest for the players, especially when it comes to money. So anything that they view as something that's going to be a detriment to them making as much money as possible for the players is like, yeah, we're not doing that.
Yeah. It makes sense. It's a business.
Again, but there are some amazing people that work there that do incredible things to make strides towards making the game safer. And I will say in the last 10 years or 12 years since I've been out from there, the amount that's happened in the game of football to make the game safer, I could see it on the field.
Yeah.
I see plays where a guy would have got decapitated 4 years ago versus now he's just getting tackled.
That's great. It's great the strides that they've made with it. I mean, you remember playing in high school, or me, I'm in the 80s somewhere. I can remember getting hit in the head, and it was like, I mean, you had a concussion immediately. You'd fall to the ground. I was telling you before the show, I was telling Kevin, 3 of the kids on my football team where I went, they all made the NFL. 2 of them running backs. And I can remember getting hit by one of them on a kickoff return. I mean, I must have been out cold for 5 minutes. Then you wake up and you're like, oh boy, and you run back into the huddle and you didn't feel right for like a month after something like that. So it's great to see they're making strides in the right area.
Were you in the wedge?
Yes. Yeah.
That is the best rule that they made, that you can't do a wedge anymore because I have so many stories about just getting absolutely demolished in the wedge. I'm glad they did away with that. But when you told me the story about the being on kick return, I'm like, he was definitely in the wedge.
Definitely in the wedge. And, and I'm all 5'0", right? So you're playing the intensity with how hard you feel like you need to play. It's reckless abandon, as you remember.
Yeah, throw your body out there.
That's it. Throw your body out there, and you know what? Whatever happens, happens. But again, to your point, the NFL's done some amazing things for player safety, for kids playing in high school and in Pop Warner and everything like that. It's great strides they've made. So, all right, so you you leave Georgetown, and you get into the healthcare field.
Yeah, so the physical therapist that worked with me after my injury to kind of get my weight back, I just happened to talk to him on the phone, and he had a job available in his physical therapy office that basically was just like cleaning tables. It's like a rehab aid. It's like I help patients with exercises and clean the tables and get ice packs for people. It was very like entry level job, but I was bored. So I kind of transitioned that into like a research role in the sports medicine department where, again, I wasn't working on like these sports health and safety initiatives that I would have loved to work on. It was kind of these other ancillary projects. And I was just bored. So I kind of developed this podcast stemming from my injury.
Right.
All about transitioning to life after sports, overcoming injury, illness, obstacle that I did for almost 5 years.
That's great. And I know you did a couple hundred episodes on the podcast. And what's the name of the podcast?
It's called Heads and Tails. So it was like heads as in multiple heads, the letter N, and then tails spent TALES, like you're telling a story.
Right. Now, did you love doing the podcast? You love doing it?
Yeah, I loved every second of it.
Yeah.
I wish I could have made more money doing it. I love doing it, and it gave me a great skill set for what I'm doing now.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's great. Now, and you were looking at the transformation of life after sports in talking through these podcasts, correct?
Right. Yeah. So what I alluded to earlier is that I had that turmoil in my head after losing the identity of being a football player. So what I've since learned through some other people that have come on the podcast, which I started the podcast to learn from myself partially and to help other people.
And you're talking about players that had been injured in sports, correct? These are generally the guests.
Yeah. Okay. Or other entrepreneurs or athletes that have other things going on, that they're not just athletes. They do other things.
Right.
I learned eventually that and it was brought up to me in an interview that I was doing on that podcast. And he was talking about the transition to life. I was mentioning, like, we talk about the transition to life after sports. He's like, oh yeah, the transformation. I'm like, oh, I never heard of it talked about that way, because transition is like, you're just kind of, getting battered around by the waves and like life's happening to you. You're not as in control versus transformation. You're doing something. You have to do something to transform. It takes action. And the podcast was that transformation to me. It was the action that I needed to prove to myself that I'm not just an athlete. I'm not just a football player. I can do way more things. I'm way more creative than just playing a sport. So that kind of gave me the confidence to move on. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love that. That's a nugget there for anyone listening. Transformation, that word, that's an action word. It's not, you're not transforming, the transformation of anything, that's the action that it takes to go to another level of what you're trying to accomplish. It's fantastic. Yeah. Shout out to Vince Ruiz, who I'm still buddies with today, who coined that term for me, but I kind of just ran with it. That's great. Thanks, Vince. Yeah. So, all right. So now you're doing the podcast. We do the podcast for several years, doing a couple hundred episodes. How do you end up in real estate? Yeah. So actually that guy that I was just talking about, Vince Ruiz, he was a military guy, and he was doing some event out in Denver where he met these two realtors. One of them is a veteran also, who are crushing it with this YouTube channel as a lead generation source. So I had been trying to apply for some med device sales jobs, which seemed like a natural progression from the healthcare job that I had, and was not having any luck in landing any of them. So when he mentioned this, I'm like, oh, like this kind of matches the skill set of what I did with the podcast. I enjoyed that part. If I can make money, with digital marketing, with selling real estate and doing it this way, I think I would really enjoy this. Right. So I pretty much just said, I'm doing it. And I think the injury and near-death experience gave me a level of urgency that I'm not willing to just wait around to see what happens with my job. Like, I know tomorrow's not promised. Like I said, my father-in-law literally passed away two weeks ago. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. From, it was unexpected. So I'm just saying, like, tomorrow's not promised. And ever since my injury, I've just had this level of urgency of like, no, I'm doing it and I'm going for it. And I'm just going to put everything that I have into doing it. So,
just along those lines for a second, you know what's interesting? Anyone that's ever had, I should say ever, but when people have a near-death experience, they come out of it reborn a lot of the times. To your point, I mean, you're looking at life from a completely different perspective. Now, granted, when you were hurt, you were a lot younger than you are today, but you come out of it understanding and appreciating life and not getting up in the morning saying, oh, all right, well, I got this problem, this problem, this problem. It becomes a transformational time to say, well, let me look at the opportunity. Let me look at what makes me happy. Let me find the value of the journey that I'm going to day in and day out. And it just seems like it's a reoccurring theme with people that have had something significant happen to them like that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel grateful that I had that experience looking back on it today, because it has given me that urgency, and it's given me maybe the confidence to just go for it, because you got nothing to lose.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess that's
fantastic. Well, I want to get into a little bit more detail about going from the podcast and then what you're doing in real estate right now. But before we go there, Kevin, we're going to take a quick break. Kevin Saum, Greg Wareham, Your Mortgage Process. We'll be right back at you.
I'm feeling
minutes.
The vibe.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Your Mortgage Process. We have Kevin Saum here today, and of course, Greg Wareham. So, all right. So, Kevin, we segue out of the podcast, and then you know Vince, your friend Vince, that was doing real estate out in Denver, correct?
Well, Vince knew guys who were doing real estate.
Oh, okay.
Denver,
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And all right. And
he opened my eyes to the opportunity.
Did you ever think about real estate prior to that?
I don't know if real estate specifically. Like, I used to love architecture, as a kid. Like, I did the CAD classes in high school and stuff like that. But I never really thought that was a thing. That it could be a thing until I saw these guys, the My High Property Brothers in Colorado, and what they were doing.
Now, did you picture yourself as you kind of matured in life as being a salesperson? Because, I mean, let's face it again. I mean, you're at Georgetown, you get a master's degree, you're on the policy end of things. I'm going to sales, that's a shift. That's a shift in paradigm. Did you see that coming?
I didn't see it coming, I guess, but I always gravitated towards like more entrepreneurial things. That's what got me excited.
Got it.
The podcast was entrepreneurial. I have like a little side hustle candle business that helped me gather enough cash to make the transition from my previous job to cover me for a few months. I built websites for people. Like, I was always doing these like little side hustle things, and like I would stay up all night doing them, and I didn't care.
Right.
Like, I was up till 2 a.m. working on this stuff, and because I felt like it was a worthy cause and it was creative and I was doing it, that it just got me going. So in my head, the sales world is more entrepreneurial, and what you get in is what you get out, and you eat what you kill. And I just liked that I was willing to bet on myself that I could make it happen.
Sure. And it's amazing too, when you're entrepreneurial, which I can relate to, it's that it really feeds that creative energy. And it's really the creative energy that motivates you on a day in and a day out basis, right? What am I building? What am I creating? What am I doing? And, sales, it's funny. You walk in the room, first thing I think, oh man, this guy's a sales guy. He looks smart. You got a great personality. But you learn over the course of time, how do I fit myself into what I'm meant to do? Right. Okay. So you meet some people out in Denver, and what happens?
I honestly never even met them. They have a podcast called Day One Dollar Zero.
Okay.
And it just talks about like literally the part of my life that I was at, where like I'm leaving my job, I've got nothing, I have no income coming in, I've got no health insurance. Now, shout out to my wife, because she's a stud, and she crushes it.
Shout out to the wives. Let's go. I hear that.
Honestly, I couldn't do it without her.
Yeah.
Like, because she does so well in her profession, it was less of a risk for me to do this, and she's been supportive of that. But yeah, I mean, I just really was interested in what they were doing with that YouTube stuff because I was seeing that no other realtors in my area were really doing it. And if they were, it wasn't that great. Right. So, I mean, to me, there was like, the opportunity is just prime to take it.
So you start your own YouTube channel.
Yeah. I started it probably, 4 months after I quit my job and started doing real estate full time. And it's been a slow burn. My channel is called Living in Morris County.
Okay.
But I talk about, the pros and cons of living in, towns in my area, neighborhood tours. I got the GoPro suction cup to my truck that I drive around neighborhood. So if you see a truck with tinted out windows and a GoPro strapped to the window and drones flying around, it's probably me. I'm not like looking in your window. I'm just trying to make some good content for bringing great people to your neighborhood potentially.
That's great. Well, I want to back up for a second because you got to put that together mentally. I mean, I know from doing a podcast and different things, YouTube channels and things that we've done, it's not that easy. First, you got to kind of visualize what you want it to look like, right?
Yeah.
So as you're kind of writing this stuff down as to what you want to do, what do you think was the most important part of it?
In terms of like just starting
strategy.
The strategy of doing. So again, I'm not going to claim that I like invented the realtor YouTube channels at all. Yep. I'm just taking bits and pieces of people who I think are doing it great, and then iterating off of that to make it my own. And I think that's why I like the creativity, is that there's a proven concept that it works. Yeah. I know it works. Yeah. And if you do it a certain way and stick to the script, it's going to work.
Hey, imitation's the best form of flattery. Yeah. Right. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just trying to make it our wheel.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really hard to do the videos. Yeah. And when I was recording the first few, I'm like, there is no way other realtors are going to do this. Like they're going to do one video and be like, yeah, this is way too hard and quit. But I saw the opportunity in that. It's like, I did the podcast for 5 years. I did 200, interviews. I did weekly interviews for probably 3 years straight. And that is a commitment and a discipline that I am very grateful for, that I had that experience, because when I was doing those first few videos and I wanted to quit and I wanted to say, wow, this is horrible and so uncomfortable and I hate it, I saw that as the opportunity, because I knew that I've already proven that I had a discipline and a commitment. I could do it. And I just I don't think other realtors, I'm sure there will be. And if you are and you want to learn more about it, I'm more than willing to talk about how I go about it. Yeah. But I would say 99% of realtors, this is not for them.
Yeah, well, no, to your point, it's very difficult to do. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline. Nick and I have spoken about it in the past after doing this show for going on 2 years now. Like the burnout rate for doing these things are what, Nick, 95%? Something like that. Nick's giving me the head nod. So 95%, because it's hard. Right. It's hard to come up with content. It's hard to come up with material. It's hard to be entertaining. It's hard to make it interesting. Right. Right? Because real estate in and of itself, people are interested in home ownership and architecture and things like that. But it's got the content has to be delivered in a fashion that engages people. Right. And there's a talent to do that, and there's planning that goes along with that, and there's consistency to get better at it.
Yeah, and to me, selling real estate, I don't even look at it as like selling. I look at it as like I'm helping. Right. Because you want a house? All right, well, I'm here to help you. I know exactly what you need to do to beat out 23 offers that are on a house. Right. If you want to do it, I'm here to help you. I can help you execute. And if you're trying to sell your house for the most amount of money, I can help you with that too. Right. If you don't want to, all right, well, then I can help you with something else. I'll take your trash in or something. I don't know. But I use pick up your dry Clayton. That's yeah. That's I'm just saying, I'm not selling a product. The product is me. It's my standard level of how I execute everything I do. So when it was the podcast, it was putting out content to the best of my ability every single week. Just like now, it's putting out YouTube videos every single week. That it's, I'm just trying to provide information to people. You're educating. Yeah. And it's coaching, and it's fun. It's hard. And through the podcast and stuff, when we were talking, we were just saying how things are hard. Yeah. Right. I feel like my injury was as severe as it was because of how I viewed the definition of toughness. And the definition of toughness, how I looked at it when I was 17, was all right, how big are my muscles? Playing hurt. How many girls are in the stands cheering for you or wearing your jersey? That in my head was that's tough. You had girls wearing your jersey? Because I asked them to.
Let's go, Kevin.
I'm so jealous.
No, literally because I asked them to.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But through the podcast, I learned that toughness is none of that. Right. That's like running on default and not thinking at all. That's just blind toughness. What toughness really is doing the hard thing. Yeah. And
that's where the real growth happens.
Exactly. Yeah. Doing the hard thing, stepping into the unknown. That's toughness. Yeah. and you have the ability to choose to do those things every single day.
Yeah.
When I was driving here today, I had an hour drive. I had a list of phone calls. Like I'm trying to, with the team, they have like this push this month to have 120 contacts. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to call my sphere so that everyone knows that I'm selling real estate now. So on the way here, I'm like, all right, I really don't want to. I would really love to just listen to a podcast for an hour drive down here. But you know what? I'm going to make my phone calls.
Yeah.
I'm going to make this productive. And I did it. I had 2 great conversations with people who, maybe they'll want to buy a house or sell a house. So.
You know what? And along the toughness, I look at that and call it perseverance, right? And I think that that's one of the strongest attributes of any business person, any entrepreneur, any individual. How well can you persevere? Because anybody can try anything. But the pattern for people generally is I'm going to try to do something and I'm willing to work and engage in it. But if I do not receive the results I was looking for in however I've defined that period of time, I back out of it and I do something else, versus going after a day after day after day. A good analogy is you're chopping down a tree, right? So you could go out every day with your axe and you could take a swing. You could take 2 swings at a tree, day one. Next day you come out and say, hey, that tree didn't fall. I'm going to go to the other tree, take 2 swings. It doesn't fall. And next thing you know, you've taken a swing at 100 different trees on your lot. Or you can come out every day and look at that tree and say 2 swings every day, and eventually that tree is going to fall. So you either have a tree that fell or you have a bunch of damaged trees sitting in your yard because you didn't have the perseverance and the consistency to go about doing it.
You definitely sound like a Rutgers guy.
I told you I got 2 kids at Rutgers.
Yeah, Shiano's. That's like Shiano's whole thing. Like,
is it?
Yeah,
that's funny.
He literally talks about like going through a forest and like literally, chopping down the trees, but like every day, just going after that tree until it falls, then work on the next one. But yeah, that's like Rutgers football's like slogan is chop. Chop
that's the name of the game.
Yeah,
it's true though. Yeah. I mean, that's what life's all about, and those are the battles, and you have to enjoy taking those swings. And I think that we get blinded at times to see what's in the way of taking the swings, right? Or, oh man, I got to take 2 to 5 swings at this tree today. What are you kidding me? Versus getting up and being like, man, I can't wait to get these swings in because I'm going to knock that tree down eventually, and having the vision to be able to do that. So anyway, I digress. We have the YouTube channel, and you're out and about and you're showing different properties. Walk me through what you're doing when you're out there.
So like when I'm actually doing the videos itself, I mean, it really depends on the type of video I'm doing. Like sometimes, like yesterday, I did a screen recording of a map tour. I did a map tour of town using Google Earth.
Right.
So just to like specifically show where certain things are in relation to others, because if I just do a neighborhood tour, you might not get that same perspective.
Right.
But yeah, I'm out there with the GoPro doing vlogs. I just did there's a big long trail in Morris County called the Columbia Trail. It's 16 miles long. Mm-hmm. And I did a vlog of the whole entire thing of like what you see along the way. I stopped at coffee shop. There's a Clydesdale farm. I was actually able to pet the Clydesdales. There was all sorts of other scenery along the way.
That's
but
awesome.
I'm trying to give people a boots on the ground.
Yeah, a day in the life.
For like what it's like to live in these areas. Because I actually just talked to a client that I got through my YouTube channel last week. And he's like, yeah, honestly, man, like without your content, it's like forums from like 20 years ago to learn about what people are like, what it's like to live in certain areas.
Sure.
It's like those, like what the moms, all comment on,
right.
Stuff like that. But I'm like, it's working.
No, it's great. It's the day in the life. Hey,
yeah.
What's it like to live here?
Yeah.
I'm driven by horse farms. I still have accessibility to Manhattan. You can work and live in Morristown.
Yeah.
You can take the train to the city. You can do all sorts of different. I used to work in Morristown. It's a beautiful town. I love that whole Morris County area.
Yeah.
So do you do any type of comparisons between homes to say, hey, here's what you get for your money in particular areas?
So in my neighborhood tours, like I do talk about price points in each neighborhood. So you can see like, all right, well, maybe that neighborhood's out of my price range, but this one is.
Right.
And then I also do comparisons of towns. So like, all right, you might like Long Valley or Mount Olive. They're right next to each other.
Right.
They both have great schools. But like this one's got lower median home sale price versus this one. So this one you might be able to afford easier than the other town. So yeah, I do a lot of comparisons, and I try to let people kind of dictate what content I produce just by questions that they ask.
You know what would be a fun one on there? What's it cost to be in the home? So, hey, you see this house in this particular area? You could be in this house. This is approximately what your payment would look like.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that changes day to day. I might know a mortgage guy that could help you with that. That'd be fun because people want to know, okay, if I want to be in this house, this beautiful area, what's it look like?
Yeah.
And can I afford to be in there? Yeah. Exactly. And, they gotta call Kevin if they're going to go see the property.
Yeah. Because like the monthly payment is probably what people mostly care about, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Especially in a market like this where we've seen the escalation in prices over the course of time and we've seen the escalation in interest rates. At the end of the day, comes down to, is the property affordable for me or is it not? And there's two different types of affordability. There's what you qualify for on paper, and then there's what am I comfortable paying? Right. And there can be two totally different numbers. I was just having that conversation with someone this morning. Well, you can support a $5,000 a month mortgage payment. On paper, you qualify, but do you want to spend that much? No, I want it to be $3,800 a month. Okay, well, let's refine our search, and this is what we're looking for. But it's just that education, to your point, and what you're doing is, hey, what does this look like, and what does it cost?
Right, and that's the first step in the home buying process, to really have a feel for, what am I comfortable with? What can I do? And then what am I comfortable with in terms of a monthly payment?
Yeah, and taking a page out of your book or my book about the optimism associated with it, when you're purchasing a home, that's supposed to be fun, right? Work with guys like Kevin, with people like myself to understand the process, enjoy the process and be comfortable with it, right? Because when you move in, you don't want to think about how you're going to pay your mortgage. You want to live, and at the same time, you want to be able to be in that house at the same time. So, anyway, what else? What other type of things do we do on the road on the YouTube channel?
That's pretty much the bulk of it. Like, I think today there's a carnival in Chester. I'm going to bring the drone and try to get some content and do a little video with this fireman's carnival. But in the fall, because I'm a big football guy.
Yeah,
I make these like Instagram reels for the high school kids. Like I go to the games. And I'll take like these highlight video type things and just put a reel together, tag a bunch of kids, and like they blow up. Like the kids absolutely love them.
Oh, that's great.
The parents love them, and they get all shared around. But like I have fun doing that because I'm a sports guy. So like I love the aesthetic of just the little nuances of a game, like grabbing a drink of water or the celebration after a touchdown where the teammate lifts the guy in the air. And obviously I bring the drone because that's like the money maker. So I do like a little spin around the field and try to get like some really cool videos for a population that usually doesn't get cool videos.
Right. That's fantastic. I love that idea. Hey, at the end of the day, it's great branding, but more importantly, kids love it, making people happy. You're capturing moments that generally aren't captured that people can reflect on and appreciate. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's fun.
Oh, I love it. You're a great guy, Kevin.
Thanks, Greg.
Likewise.
It's been an easy conversation. We just met, but it feels like we've known each other for forever. So I appreciate the hospitality and.
Well, it's great to have you. So if someone's up in Morristown and they were looking to purchase a home out there, or even more importantly, if they wanted to become educated on the marketplace, Kevin, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, a few ways. I mean, you could find me on Instagram at just kevin.saum. My email address is kevin@kevinsaum.com. And those are probably the two best ways. You can call me. I feel like most people will just be easier.
What's your phone number?
All right, 908-892-2892.
Here, give it to us one more time. That was fast.
908-892-2892.
Call Kevin. That's your market. And then the YouTube channel, how do we follow that? Like, we got to follow everything.
Yeah, the handle is technically just like living in Morris County.
Living in Morris County.
Yeah. I eventually want to scale it to other areas, but for
totally.
For now,
and I'm thinking that as you're talking because we're doing something very similar in that vlogging, a day in the life type of thing, but we're Jersey Shore oriented, right? But you could take that model once you master it, and you could certainly start to move that into different areas.
And teach other agents to be the advocate or spokesperson in whatever area it is. So
yeah, that's awesome. So if an agent was looking to contact you, you're open for them reaching out to you to say, hey, how do you set this up and what?
Oh yeah, like? For sure. If you're a realtor listening to this and you're interested in if the YouTube thing sounds like it's interesting to you, yeah, definitely send me an email or shoot me a text or call me. I'd be glad to.
It's interesting to everyone. It's, can they get there?
Yeah.
Right?
Are you, if you're willing to put the work in and execute and not make money off of it for a year? Yeah. Be my guest. I'm glad to talk to you about it.
I'm your guy.
Yeah. But I mean, all the people who are successful with this YouTube stuff, they always say like, you got to give at least 6 months to a year before you'll actually start generating any kind of leads from it, which I'm finding to be pretty accurate.
It's time over task. And I think even more importantly, you truly need to enjoy what you're doing, because to your point, it's not going to make you rich overnight. There's not a ton of money in it. But if your focus is on providing education, value to peers in the field, to the consumer, to the community, then you're doing the right thing.
Right.
And you can really enjoy doing that.
Yeah. And like from your perspective, like one of the first houses I sold last year, earlier in my career, came from someone who I grew up with, but I wasn't like super good friends with her, but I had her on my podcast.
Yeah.
So I spent 2 hours with her talking about her story and, the struggles that she overcame. And she knew plenty of other realtors, but I honestly think that because of that time that we had together to talk about her story and the effort that I put into making her episode great, that she called me first,
right,
to do that and to give me a chance. So I'm just saying, from your perspective, even if it's people who aren't listening, like for me personally, we have a much stronger connection now, than we ever would have had, for me listening. So.
Yeah. You know what? Life is about people.
Yeah.
And it's about relationships, about getting to know people. It's getting to understand people. And it's getting to communicate. It's communicating with people. I think that we as a society have a tendency to complicate that. I think politically that there's not a lot of advantage there either. I think, media as well kind of can polarize people. But at the end of the day, each other's all we have. So if we invest the time and the energy into one another, great things happen, and we can do anything.
Agreed, Greg. Yeah.
So
perfect, man.
Hey, you know what, Kevin? Thanks so much for taking the time today. I know you had taken the trek down here. Kevin Saum, give your phone number one more time, please, Kevin.
It's 908-892-2892.
Thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's been great.
Thanks for the opportunity, Greg. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, and you have a great story. And if anyone needs anything in the area, please reach out to Kevin. For everybody out there, we appreciate you listening today. Kevin Saum, Greg Wareham, Your Mortgage Process. Look forward to catching up with you next week, everyone. Goodbye. Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Your Mortgage Process, hosted by Greg Wareham, produced by Greg Wareham and Nick Pavis at The Social Rift, and executively produced by The Social Rift. Thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to catching up with you next week.